And you won't believe it, maintenance command, Ambajari, RTM Nagpur University campus, then even Nandanvan area, they are all very rich. All our textbooks, unfortunately, history books, right from the schools to colleges, have this thing to say that this was a great civilization which flourished to the highest levels of evolution and development and then suddenly disappeared. So actually that doesn't happen, and that should change. We do so much of study and then we publish heavily researched articles in journals, but that never comes down to the public. But the Sengol is actually symbol of Shiv and Dharma. We support it because Sengol is actually Nandi Dwaj. Khan Doran was responsible or was actually conferred a great title because he destroyed the forts of Sitabardi and Kheljar simultaneously on the same day. You will never be able to relate your Ganpati, which you install for 10 days every year, with that Ganpati image. Why?
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to Manthan. And on this episode of Vaarta, we have with us Dr. Trivedi. Ma'am, first of all, welcome to the show. And let me tell you, it's an absolute pleasure and honor for me as a history student, as a someone who reads history and is very passionate about it. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. Like 2024 की शुरुआत मैं से कर रहा हूँ, ये मेरे लिए बहुत बड़ी बात है. So thank you for coming here. So ma'am, how are you? आप कैसे हैं?
Absolutely fine. Very happy.
Yeah, I like we can look it reflects on your face that how happy you are doing your work. So let's move on to the podcast now. Ma'am, first of all, you are an archaeologist and you have so much of experience of archaeology. Ma'am, the lay person जो सामान्य इंसान है उसको समझ मतलब he has a very naive knowledge of archaeology. उन्हें लगता है कि जमीन खोद दी और कुछ निकल गया तो that is archaeology, but it's a very scientific process. So ma'am, I would like you to break down for the audience कि archaeology क्या है, how the process work, how the system works of archaeology.
So actually, the basis of archaeology is tracing human activity. And wherever there is a presence of human beings, or wherever there has been anything created and left by human beings, or any change or anything, evolution, this is what is the scope of archaeology. Now, this is like putting it very simply because archaeology is actually a very vast and multidisciplinary subject. Because it is very simple. Archaeology and the scope of archaeology cannot be explained to a student or to any person interested in this discipline just by saying that it is a subject. Because when you talk about subject, archaeology, if it is related to human activity, then anything that human beings do come within the scope of archaeology. And that could be anything like politics, society, eating, sleeping, living, and evolving, and existing basically. And while you are existing, human beings are continuously doing things for themselves. So whatever is being created by them to within their spaces, to evolve their spaces, to develop their spaces, all those things that are being created are subjects of archaeology. So that is why it is called a multidisciplinary subject, and it encompasses everything like science, social sciences, and so on and so forth. Everything.
Yeah. Ma'am, you do excavations, and I am sure that if you find something phenomenal, it must be a very great feeling. How do you feel when you do things, you excavate, you find something like a watershed movement in history?
Yes, excavations are a very, very thrilling, are actually the thrilling part of archaeology as far as public knowledge goes. But excavations, apart from the thrill, are a very, very disciplined, methodical, and serious business. Because first thing, that when you start digging, you're disturbing the earth. Then to decide a place where you have to start digging, that is again a very big exercise. We have to decide, okay, we take this spot for putting up trenches and so on and so forth. So because that involves a lot of human effort, a lot of revenue and everything, we have to be very careful. Then once we start digging, it is, as I said, destruction of the strata of the earth. So we have to be very careful. Then because we are digging to find something, nothing should miss the eye. Even the minutest thing should not miss the eye. So that then it becomes a very serious business. And once you start digging, anything is most prone to destruction and exposure. That exposure can destroy evidence. So we have to be very, very slow, very careful. It is almost like doing a surgery on a human being. So apart from the thrill, when you actually enter the field to start excavating, you have to remain very disciplined about the timings, the way you start digging, and the implements that you use. Even the labor has to be trained and everything. So actually, thrill is there. What you asked is very relevant, because we almost start jumping when we find something great. So it is very thrilling. But since we have found it, the next immediate question comes, how to take care of it. So even that is very thrilling, a very tedious but thrilling job. But yes, the charm of archaeology is, as everyone says, that once you dig in, you find something. So what happens?
Nice. And moving on, we are sitting in Vidarbha right now, central India. Through excavations, we have found that it has a very long history, and you are one of that history makers. We can say that. So, ma'am, I want you to trace down the history of Vidarbha through archaeology and excavations. Like how old is the civilization? What was the culture back then? And what are your findings of Vidarbha?
See, when you use the word civilization, it encompasses the entire country or a region or a culture. So, Vidarbha as such is a part of the Indian civilization. Then the history and the archaeology of Vidarbha is as old as dinosaurs. Like we have evidences of dinosaur eggs and so on and so forth. So human life existed here. The terrain here was very compatible for life, for nurturing life. So along with the animal world, humans also inhabited this region right from the Paleolithic period, which is the earliest. And you will be surprised that over the years, my seniors and the past head of the departments of Nagpur University, when they did surveys and all, they realized that Nagpur city, as it is now, is sitting on several areas where we find old and Paleolithic tools, early, middle, and Stone Age tools in common parlance. So much so that we made a map, and you won't believe it, maintenance command, Ambajari, RTM Nagpur University campus, then even Nandanvan area, they are all very rich. So what used to happen is that whenever there would be a new construction and the builders would dig up the deep trenches for laying the foundation of a building, our students would go there and check the strata which is being exposed. And from there they found that, okay, this was a Paleolithic site and now a building is coming up here. Even while cable laying was being done, say about 5-6 years ago, it is still happening. So my students are always there. Archeologists are always there to see, is there anything to see? And we have never come back empty-handed. So the history of Nagpur goes back to Stone Ages.
And what kind of evidences you people find there? I mean,
Implements, stone implements, implements or in common parlance, stone tools. Hand axes, scrapers, blades, double-sided blades, and so on and so forth. So we do find them and we catalog them and we keep them. Then at a point of time, we also made a map that where in Nagpur city can you find such tools. So that map is on display in our departmental museum. You can visit there.
Yes, yes, of course. Ma'am, also in Nagpur, we have many megalithic structures that have been found. So please tell us about that. First of all, for the very lay audience, you have to explain what is megalithic structures and then move on to, yeah.
Yeah, so actually megalith is a mixture, fusion of two words. Mega means big, lith means stone. So this is a term which was coined by European archaeologists, and because there they were finding, huge menhirs and megaliths and all those things, large size stones kept near burial areas and all. In India also, the same term was used for various designs of megaliths. So some are like dolmens. Dolmens means, small stone. They may resemble, in common language, just to explain to you, they may resemble a hut, but they are not a hut. They are made of slabs of stone. And you also find stone circles. So the stone circles were made of huge boulders. And these were like, they were placed in a circular form and the burials were kept between. So basically megaliths are burial structures where human remains have been interred. And Nagpur, and I should say Vidarbha, has hundreds of megaliths. What is the reason? It is yet to be ascertained. But this area is very rich in megalithic stone circles.
Right. Ma'am, you have led many excavations in Vidarbha region and also outside Vidarbha. But while reading your bio, I found out these three major one, which is Ubali, Mandhal, and Kiljar. Ma'am, how was your experience and what are the findings you did while excavating these sites?
I will first take Mandal, which was an exploration. Exploration means it is not like, you can imagine explorers who climb the Mount Everest or something like that. But here archaeological explorations are very methodical. It is almost like a surface survey. We just look at the earth or the soil or the land and we move around just to understand what could be there, what is to be. So Mandal actually is a site which was excavated in the 1970s by Dr. Rajamitra Shastri. And it was a very rewarding experience. We found some very great things. We means my predecessors. They found some great things there. And considering that, it had to be reported. So it came upon me to report that excavation. By report, I mean publish. Bring it to the public. So because it was almost a hiatus of 40 odd years, I thought that I should be going there and taking a relook or what is the situation after 40 years of excavation. And very, very sadly, the areas that we had excavated or my seniors had excavated, they are now full of village hutments, and we can't call them encroachments because it is just expansion of that village there. So that happened, and whatever evidence was there is now sealed because now there are permanent houses there.
But when they excavated that, the authorities they उन्होंने intervene नहीं किया to preserve that sites.
See, the system of excavation is such that you have to when you are closing the site, That is, when you are concluding the excavation, you have to close it. So you have to fill in all whatever you've taken out as it is, but take out all that is to be recorded and is a part of history. So that we have to do. Yes, what did not happen is that in spite of that site being so potential, further excavations were not done. That before the settlement expands and people start making newer and newer houses and all, the material should be retrieved. So that didn't happen. And now it is impossible.
Right.
Yes. So this is a part of the exploration that I had done there, and this is what I found. I found that now Mandal is out of an archaeologist's reach. So nothing else can be done. Yes, about Ubadi. Ubadi is a megalithic site. It was excavated by me in 2015 and 2017. And of course, many people, many scholars, many archaeologists have done megalithic excavations. A lot has been published. Still, I took up that site because there were many things about megaliths which we still couldn't understand and analyze from whatever we were getting.
Ma'am, can we date that structures? Maybe?
Yeah, usually the megalithic culture as such, dated by all archaeologists, is from 1500 BCE to in Vidarbha to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century AD. But when we excavated Ubadi, and the dates that we got there, which was after a long process of scientific dating and all that, and a lot had to be done, we found that these megaliths that we had excavated in 2015 and 16, they come up to almost 700, 800 AD or CE as it is called now. So this extends the expansion of the megalithic culture to a much later date, and it is for the first time that these dates have been obtained from a megalithic excavation. Other things that came to light, and that was actually my point of view, I wanted to understand what culture could this be. Because burial, first thing, we do not associate much in India except with a few people or a few communities. Mostly it is cremation that happens. Second thing, what made these people take such pains to bury, which is a question that all archaeologists who specialize in megalithic culture ask. So my point of view was this, that if it is on Indian soil, and if everything is of India, we should look at the cultural and traditional practices of India. So for that, I did some studies of the Dharma Shastras, and there are several volumes by Dr. Pandurang Vaman Kane, one of the greatest Indologists of this country, and one or two of his volumes contained extensive description of the way people should be buried or cremated, Antyeshti Sanskar basically. And so in that there were some references in many of the Samhitas and Vedic literature which described burials. So I found something related to that, and that was very exciting for me.
What was it?
So it was like circular stones should be placed one after the other. Then the burial should be made of a person who passed away in a distant land and was cremated there, and then he was brought here. Then his remains were buried here, and what procedures should be followed, that has been explained meticulously. Then we also found evidence of horse sacrifice in the same burial. So that was also because usually many megaliths have been excavated where horse bones have been found. But what was the purpose of those disjointed horse bones? Here we found the entire skull, which was placed. So it was unmistakable evidence that there was sacrifice.
Right.
So that also was studied, and these are the good things that we could, ascertain from the Obari excavation.
There was a proper method of burials back then.
Yes. Then another thing that we found is we found very few human bones because they don't they degenerate.
Yeah.
But we found a human molar with dental filling. And dental filling means many things.
Right.
One, that people were having dental issues.
Yeah.
Second, making fillings is a part of dentistry. And till now, there has not been any study or any evidence of any kind of dentistry in the Indian subcontinent. And especially this region.
Yeah.
So it was, we are still involved in a lot of investigations were done, and yes, definitely I worked in collaboration with the Birbal Sahni Institute of Paleosciences, and there after a lot of investigations and trying to extract whatever material, because that molar was quite in a very bad shape, it was found that yes, that particular stone, a globule of stone, was actually planted there, because the person whose molar it must have been, that molar had a cavity, and it must have been a cause of pain for that person. So some prosthetic solutions were given to that person, and it was planted there.
This is phenomenal, actually.
Yes, it is actually phenomenal. And with all the scientific evidences, it will be published soon. But see, what happens is, I just want to deviate from the line, and I want to say that we do so much of scientific investigation. We means archaeologists. We do so much of study, and then we publish heavily researched articles in journals, but that never comes down to the public.
Of course, the layman would understand what is there.
Exactly. So that is why I took this opportunity to tell the people that it is a great discovery.
Yes.
And one of its kind, actually. I was telling you about the rituals.
Right.
In one of the megaliths in Ubadi, we found portholes.
Portholes, okay.
4 in alignment, and these holes pointed to the ritual of the deceased. When you put a plank of wood, place the body, and then do all the rituals, and then bury finally. So all these evidences were very exciting, and they are actually quite new for megalithic studies. I don't think they have been done before. And now I'll come to Keljar. Keljar was very exciting. Keljar is a town full of temple remains. And the biggest surprise is that in spite of Keljar being so potentially important archaeologically, nobody ever excavated that site. There are evidences, people trace the history of Keljar to the Mahabharata times. Then we also find evidence of or references to Keljar in the medieval times, at the time of Alauddin Khilji. So there was such a huge expanse of history in this that I was intrigued. And usually people don't take, people want to, archaeologists, they have this thing that we want to excavate something which is so old, that people will get excited. I feel that every part of which we have lived, I mean the current civilization from the earliest time, every part is important.
Don't you think that history is very northern India based, very northern centric, very Delhi centric? The archaeology, even excavations, like मतलब कौन सोचेगा कि Vidarbha would be so rich in archaeology, and we always focus on the northern archaeology, the big industrial civilizations, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, but
Yes, absolutely. What you're saying is it's an excellent observation, because the archaeology of Vidarbha has, it has always taken a backseat. I cannot say that anyone is to be blamed for that. It is just this, that the people of this region and the students and everything, the awareness about archaeology is very less, and the younger generation doesn't want to come. Because one thing people feel that isme you have to struggle for a long time, then you land up in a job. Plus, there is no private sector in this. All jobs are public sector, government jobs. And research mostly youngsters don't want to do. So that is one. And there are also people who come out of curiosity, take admission, and then they get scared. We cannot stay out of home for 2 months and 3 months and do field work. So
And then also
it's a difficult subject.
There is this, people are not, especially the youth, they are not, they don't take pride in their history. And that is, I think, one of the reasons, why we don't see youngster pursuing this field.
Yes. It is so true and it is so sad.
Yeah.
Whatever work, little bit, as and when I get the opportunity to speak about India, history and heritage, I have always said that the word heritage says it all.
Yes.
It is all about inheritance. What you have inherited. If you do not have respect for that, what will your identity be?
Of course, actually.
It will be lost. And when a time comes that you realize that everything is lost and you look back, there will be only darkness.
Right.
So that should not happen. And heritage awareness goes hand in hand with archaeology. So a person who is passionate about heritage has to work on archaeology. And awareness is not there. And there have been great scholars from Vidarbha and Nagpur actually, who have contributed greatly to the history and the archaeology of India. There have been some like Dr. V.V. Mirashi, one of the greatest Indologists, then Dr. S.B. Dev, my guru, Dr. Ajay Mitra Shastri, a very versatile, very eminent scholar. They put in their lifetime efforts in this. But to what? It never reached the public. Right. So it all comes to awareness, interest, and some kind of passion. That is why I feel that why do you want to follow the beaten path? Why don't you deviate? Why don't you explore? The youngsters should explore.
Ma'am, as a young person, I can really tell you and I feel very proud to tell you this, that this generation and the time has finally come when people of my age, they are finally interested in history as a subject, because we see new historicism coming in, new historians coming in, putting in a very Indic based perspective. And even our podcast is the Indic podcast. So that is a very happy part of it. Yeah. And please continue on, Khelji. You were saying. I cut your thought. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So, Keljar I wanted to do because I wanted to know something about a period which is known as the early medieval period and medieval period. See, everyone feels कि पुरानी चीज ढूंढना है. So they want to go right up to the Stone Ages. What happens in between is something like, oh, it's medieval period. So, oh, it's a early medieval, quite recent, just a millennium old, just 900 years old, just 600 years old. But if you go to another country, even something which is 75 years old is considered to be archaeology.
Right.
Why doesn't that happen in this country? Because that is also a part of your civilization, right? So this is the reason why I wanted to take Keljar. And people were saying, why are you taking this site? I said, no, I want to do it. And it was very exciting. Wherever we would dig, we would find structures. You won't believe it, we found several temple remains. And what we counted there, we didn't expose them all, of course. Just 2 sites of Keljar gave out temples, but we documented 23 temples demolished and debris buried inside or reused by the village people. Because while we were surveying the village, the entire village was full of stones, pieces of stones of temple remains, and what are known as architectural members or pieces. So it was flooded. So it was very exciting. Then we also exposed what is known in Maharashtra as Vihir, stepped wells of various designs, beautiful designs. They were there. There is one still existing, but we exposed another one with a very different design. So when we asked the old people there, very old, they were very happy to tell us that there are almost 7 stepped wells only within the vicinity of Kelja. And they were of very different designs. So people knew, people worshipped water. The stepped wells were very close to the vicinity of the now destroyed temples. So that was almost like, history was coming out of Kelja. And then we discovered what was forgotten by the local people of Kelja is we found the bastion of the old fort. And then when we went into the history of that, see, Alauddin Khilji had 2 commander-in-chiefs. One was Malikafu. The other was another lesser-known person, Khan Doran. And the fort of Keljar is actually mentioned in the epitaph of Khan Doran.
Oh, I see.
In Pakistan.
That's quite a connection.
And there he's उनकी जो ग्लोरी में जो लिखा हुआ है वो उसमें लिखा है कि खान दौरान was responsible or was actually conferred a great title because he destroyed the forts of Sitabardi and Khiljar simultaneously.
Acha.
On the same day.
Oh.
Yes. So, see, we don't know about our own. So, these were very exciting things. And here, I would also like to put in something very lightly, that it so happened that somehow, the media people came to know about this and they came to our site and they were very excited to see the bastion and the stepped wells and temple remains and all. And when they asked me which period and all, I said medieval period. When we, this is the time. So that time, this movie Padmavat was released. Padmavat ही है ना वो?
Padmavat.
Alauddin Khilji उसी में है. हाँ. So these people, the Radio Mirchi people and everyone, we were like, God, doing all this at the excavation site is not done. So they said, so this is how, what you were saying about awareness amongst the public, this is how they identify archaeology and history. Movies, serials, but, even Indiana Jones. But the serious part is never taken into account.
And even what they document, what the Bollywood documents is not real history. They just take some fragments.
It is a story.
Yeah, it's a story.
And if we give a narration of an archaeological site without any excitement and story, it would be worthless.
Yeah.
Who's going to watch that film?
Right.
So obviously they have to, as you said, the thrill of archaeology. So they have to add storylines to everything. So even that is all right. But that Khilji name, it gave rise to so much of disturbance and so much of excitement at the site. My students were also running here and there, poor fellows. The media was hounding them. And anyway, it was fun.
Right. Ma'am, moving on to Ayodhya now. We are just, I think, 10-12 days behind the grand inauguration. I believe it's a civilizational dream come true, if I can put it in my words. Ma'am, and archaeology played a very important role in that. So, from your expert lens, I would like you to explain to us that how archaeology helped this, this grand struggle to come to an end.
So that's a very relevant question. I will start with this, that many a times people say, what is the relevance of archaeology? They say archaeology is digging up the past. Why go into the past? Future is there for us. See, the relevance of archaeology comes true now. Archaeology and archaeological finds give you scope for scientific study of your own civilization. So that is, it helps science a lot. And what we are today, what we are, how did we evolve, who were our ancestors. So this is, and it is all scientific based. It is not just, imaginary. For judiciary also, this is one of the greatest historical instances when archaeology has played a major role. The the excavations at Ayodhya, and then resolving the dispute, and now the creation of a huge temple complex there. So this is one instance, but I would also like to cite some other instances, like the Sengol. So this Sengol, when it was brought to the new parliament building recently, there was a lot of
political debate about
it. That can be said, or maybe there was a lot of debate and discussion regarding that. But the Sengol is actually symbol of Shiv and Dharma. So it goes so well with the Indian psyche. We support it because Sengol is actually Nandi Dwaj. And we have sculptures from various sites in Karnataka, especially Pattadakal, which go back to the 8th century. Of course, this Sengol is assigned to the Chola period, but this Sengol concept goes much beyond that. It goes to the 8th century, and that is approximately 745 CE. So there we have sculptures in the Virupaksha temple in Pattadakal, where there is an image of Shiva with the Sengol behind him. And there is a Dwaj with a Nandi sitting on it. So this is again archaeology. Right. So when you have to, archaeologists are remembered when some such dispute is to be resolved. So this is the role of archaeology, and I appreciate all that is happening now. For the first time, I think I should say that archaeologists are being heard.
Being heard, yeah. Yes. Exactly. By moving on, Indian ancient art is one of your fortes. And as you said, I didn't know this. मेरा ये perspective था कि just the Mauryan art is, very glorious. But as you told me that art even before that is pretty beautiful. So please explain what Indian ancient art is, and your PhD is also in northern sculptures and art. So please elaborate on that.
Yes, we have a discipline called art history, which is a part of archaeology. So in art history, obviously, as the name says, we go into the history of art. What happens is that usually people look at sculptures and they say it's beautiful, the sculptor must have been great and he worked hard. And what we have to understand is what goes behind the creation of that sculpture. So that is history of art. We involve the Shastras. Then we also involve the pre-existing traditions. Then we also involve the artist and his imaginary skills, and ultimately the sculpture. So this is how art is created. History of Indian art obviously goes back to, I would say, even the Stone Age tools are art, because they are created by man. Anything imaginary and then put into something tangible is art. So even that is art. And that, if we find from the Stone Ages, then that is art. Then beautifully made, very symmetrically made Stone Age tools, microliths, they are also art. So artistic concept and the evolution of the aesthetic and the artistic psychology of man begins from then. So we cannot just, what happens is usually we talk about Mauryan art. So it has become a cliche. Yeah. Oh, Indian art, ancient art, okay, Mauryan art. It is not that. Why don't you go to the Harappan civilization? There are so many. There again we talk about the dancing girl. But what about the beautiful terracotta seals and all those things that were made? So even that is art. Imaginary, completely. I would also like to concentrate on the art of Vidarbha. Yeah. In this context, giving you a general idea of whatever is art. So in Vidarbha, the sculptures that have been found, the images that have been found, even the coins of that were found from Vidarbha, even the inscriptions that are found from Vidarbha, are of a very high quality. The art of Vidarbha is not discussed much, but there were ruling dynasties here which were related to the Satvahan period, then the Vakatak period, and after that the the Chalukya Rashtrakuta period, and then we come to the Yadav period. All along, beautiful temples and sculptures were being made. The people of Vidarbha don't even know about them. So these are all placed in the museums which people don't visit. Then there are old places, temples where people go. Unfortunately, they go there now. It has become, it is very sad to say that such sites have now just become, places of no aesthetic interest, just taking selfies and, putting up your status. But these aesthetically refined and beautiful images are a part of the Indian concept of art and aesthetics. So the art and sculpture that was made during the Vakatak period is very, very remarkable. You won't believe it, that people from all over the world come here to admire the jewelry and the hairstyles of these sculptures. They are so unique and beautiful, especially of the Vakatak period. Of course, they tell you the story also. They tell you about the god, the evolution of that deity, and whatever the shastras and everything that are like Kartikeya, Shiv, Durga, Vishnu, whatever deity. They of course they represent that. Basically, they are all religious architecture and sculpture. Sorry, but the aesthetic part is forgotten. So, as an art historian, I have concentrated more on that. Analyzing the image, giving the physical details of the image, and then going into aesthetics. That is art history. And I would take this opportunity to, urge you, take your friends, go to places. I will tell you this place called Markanda in Chandrapur district. The kind of imagery that you see there on the temple walls, they are beautiful. Go to Ramtek, see those images, question yourself, search for answers, and then you will understand what I'm saying.
Right. Absolutely. And also temples, they have, very intense carvings on them, and it's of course it's beautiful. Ma'am, you also you are a strong ambassador of museums. You talk about it a lot. Ma'am, how important museums are and how relevant it is in today's age? Because let me tell you, no one goes to museum nowadays, especially the youth. मतलब म्यूजियम बस स्कूल का एनुअल ट्रिप बन के रह गया है, जो साल में एक बार होता है, वो भी होता है नहीं होता है पता नहीं आजकल. So what is your take on this declining fashion of museums?
Yes, museums are places where you just go and place things and they'll be secure there. This is what was thought about as far as museums are concerned. But museums are a repository of your ancestors. The more you visit museums, the more your maturity about your own civilization and inheritance begins and grows. So visiting museums, it happens both ways. See, when you visit a museum, you go there as a child. Maybe if you go there as a 7th, 8th standard student, you will say, oh, these are very nice things. And they'll be in your memory like a good school trip, as you said, we went with. But the person who's there in the museum has to be very informed.
Right.
He has to tell you about the things, to generate your interest. Because if that place is, if that a certain piece has been displayed in the museum, what is the worth of that
And that's
piece?
what when I visited museum, there was no one to tell me what is it, and I was left to my own perception of things.
So many a times you see that when you of this these times, if you go to a museum and if you see an old image of, say, Ganpati, you will never be able to relate your Ganpati, which you install for 10 days every year, with that Ganpati image. Why? Because, there is an anomaly. There is no connection. And that connection has never been established. No one has made an effort to establish that connection, that look, that image which is kept in the museum, which was made almost 1,000 years back, also holds a modak or a laddu, has a mouse. So that connection is not established because nobody has told you about Ganesh. It is as simple as, you singing the Aarti of Ganesh or Ganpati, and you're singing about his attributes, but you never realize that you're singing about his attributes. Aarti is more like, clapping and ringing the... that is all. But Jai Ganesh Deva, Mata Jaki Parvati, Pita Mahadeva, बायोडेटा बता दिया आपने उनका, ठीक है. फूल चढ़े, हार चढ़े और चढ़े मेवा, तो आप फूल हार लाते हैं रोज, मेवा चढ़ाते हैं क्योंकि उनको वही पसंद है, ठीक है ना. देन मूसे की सवारी, he is riding on a mouse. Why? Because Ganpati is a deity who evolved from these agricultural practices. He was a part of nature. That is why he has an elephant head. He lives on flora. And Musa means, they are the people who connect a farmer with the earth. They live in fields. So they destroy the fields also. So an elephant or, Ganpati protects the fields by controlling the mice. That is why the mouse sits beneath him. No nonsense. अब ये कितनी इंटरेस्टिंग बात है. अगर आप इस तरह से गणपति को समझें तो आपको भी इंटरेस्ट आएगा ना. फिर आप म्यूजियम में जाएंगे तो आप देखेंगे कि अच्छा ये तो हम रोज करते हैं अपने घर में.
कनेक्शन बन जाता है वो.
Yes. So if there are no people to tell you about all these things, how does the connection be established? That is why museums are necessary. Because all said and done, people may not go, but if museums would not have been there, आज बहुत सारी चीजें would have been lost. So they are repositories, they protect things, they are kept in a safe place.
But do you think that the government spends enough to preserve all these museums?
See, in the past I cannot say, because yes, museums were the less preferred, because museums are usually considered to be how much revenue do you generate. Now if people don't visit, how do you generate the revenue? Plus government museums, they have this that do not charge too much. So there is always a paucity of funds of being regenerated through the museum itself. It is for the government to give more attention. And now I feel that there is almost like a revival. A lot of museums are being revamped and grants are being given and new museums are being established. And I would say that the awareness for museums and such spaces should go even to the village level, because every village has its identity.
Yes.
Every village has its ancestral practices, and India is so diverse.
Right.
So such things should be there. Recently we did a program on Thakurwadi in the west, in western Maharashtra. So the Thakurwadi is a place where these, this puppetry tradition was there, and it is being carried forward by people. They were also patronized by the government, and at a certain point of time they realized that now our practice is, now public is also not coming to listen to their or to watch their puppetry programs and all, and things are now getting, public is losing interest. So what did they do? They took all their ancestral puppetry material and they created a museum of these people. So we find the old puppets which are almost 100, 150 years old and everything kept. At least they have preserved the old tradition.
It's a good sign.
Tomorrow, if this practice of puppetry
Declines.
declines, at least that will be there. That this was existing.
That's where museum comes into the play.
Yes.
That's the exact truth.
Yes. So, and I would also like to tell you that our department has been excavating since the past so many years, 65, 70 years. So we had so much of material which was just kept. So I wanted, people to generate. We also have museology as a subject in our department. So whatever was kept there, I took the silent period of the pandemic and I collected 4-5 of my interested students and we all got together, some of my colleagues also, some teachers, and we all got together and we revamped the museum. So now it has become a topic of great interest and a lot of people visit that museum.
Ma'am, I would like to end this podcast with this last question. I just noted it down that what is your take on the sudden disappearance of the Indus Valley civilization and the River Saraswati? Because the Indus Valley civilization and the Vedic literature, the common link is Saraswati. So many historians say that this both the period went hand in hand, and but later the river dried up or what happened, and the civilization dismissed. So what is your take on that?
All our textbooks, unfortunately, history books, right from the schools to colleges, have this thing to say that this was a great civilization which flourished to the highest levels of evolution and development and then suddenly disappeared. So actually that doesn't happen, and that should change. Now there are such great discoveries that are being made through excavations, like we have sites of Rakhi Ghadi, Birdana, and of course Dholavira, which is now a UNESCO heritage site. So all these sites are, almost, they are trying to say that we did not come to an end. And see, when we talk about the Harappan civilization, we talk about a span of almost 3,000, 4,000 years. And we are already experiencing change in the environment and the ecosystem during our lifetime. So that span is very long. There was a time when there are evidences through archaeology and excavations that these towns were, these sites, Indus Valley towns, were destroyed several times by floods, by drought, and changing course of rivers and all. But they came back. But when a time came that now things are like, I will tell you about this Saraswati thing. That, of course, it is an old river. It is mentioned in the Rig Veda also, along with another river, Drishadvati. So these rivers have been there. They were there. And now ISRO and all are mapping the Saraswati also. So what happened is that through these mappings and geological and geophysical studies, it was understood that two main rivers, which were watering many of the sites in India, they disappeared. They dried down because of the changing climatic conditions, like the Yamuna and the Satluj. So many of these rivers, when they dried down, obviously when a river starts drying down, it doesn't happen suddenly. And people just don't die at the site. They can migrate. So I feel that this particular discussion on Sindhu Saraswati civilization has a lot of relevance, because nothing comes to an end like this. And if the Sindhu Saraswati in researches, and there are a lot of archaeologists who are continuously involved in establishing the link between the Harappan and the Rigvedic culture, that should happen. That will really establish a continuous sequence of chronology of the history of this country.
True. Ma'am, actually this question came up while I was reading a book called The Land of Seven Rivers by Sanjeev Sanyal. So that book actually gave me this question.
Ma'am, can you tell the history of Nagpur? starting from the people who were the Naga peoples. We call it, this is the place of Nagas, Naga civilization. After that, how it was made, Gond kings were there who built this city. After that, Bhosle kings. Overall,
That will require a separate podcast. It's a very long history.
Yes, that will be required. In brief, see, Nagas, Nag people, yes, people associate this place with Nag, but then archaeologically we need to do a lot more of research on that. Then, as I told you, Nagpur is a prehistoric city. So the history of Nagpur begins from there. Then after the Nagas, or maybe the popular thing that is going around the Nagas, then we have such great dynasties ruling over Nagpur. The Satavahanas, the Vakatakas, then the Rashtrakutas, Chalukyas, and that period. Then we also come to the Yadavas, who were very important. आपका जो रामटेक का गढ़ मंदिर है वो भी उसी समय बनाया गया, तो वो एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट पीरियड था. एंड द यादवस वर द लास्ट ग्रेट डायनेस्टी ऑफ इंडिजिनस इंडिया who were defending this region from the onslaught of the invasions. So Nagpur, then of course the Sultanate period, the Mughal period, all these periods came. And then after that we come to the Bhoslas. So the Bhoslas also contributed a lot to the history and culture of this people, of this region. Of course the Gonds are also there. Actually, for that period, the medieval period, I would say, 13th century to 18th, 19th century onward. That is the time when the culture of Vidarbha developed in the way as we see it now. The cuisine of Vidarbha. That is also history. Why I am giving you these examples is that just don't go by dynasties. I would say dynasties se zyada culture rehta hai. So the cuisine of Vidarbha, so much of, the Bhivapur ki mirchi, alright, the weaving traditions of Vidarbha. The weavers are being forgotten. They are somehow struggling to come back into existence. So that is there. Then, the Jadipatti culture of Vidarbha. This is also a part of history. So when you ask about history, I would be saying that why go by dynasties? Yes, we can say that this happened during the period of this king. Alright. But culture was already continuously evolving. It never came to an end. A dynasty may change, culture cannot change.
One more question. There are two type of peoples in Nagpur. One set said this is a civilization area. History. Nagpur was always a civilized kind of area where colonies were built. And some said this is a tribal area. It's more belong to the tribal peoples. What about
that? Is true about Nagpur, that is true about Vidarbha, that is true about Maharashtra, that is true about the entire country. See, indigenous tribes have always inhabited this country in all areas, and they are still there. Their culture is so great. It has not been invaded by so many, and then this is the urban culture that we say. We call it the urban culture. I don't know why we call it the urban culture, but still it is called the, the modern and the urban culture, civilized culture. But both these traditions, the tribals have always moved along with us, and we are also a part of the same, movement or the flow. So that is continuing still, and I'm very happy it is still continuing. Because those cultures that they nurture or they are still continuing to practice, they give so many answers to our own history.
So, ma'am, this was the end of the podcast. So, thank you so much for joining us. I can't tell you, it's actually my selfish pleasure to be sitting here with you, and I can't wait for the next podcast with you, because it's like it's my happy go dream to be sitting with you. You're such a historian, and I am into history, so I really enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for coming, and we wish you all the best for your coming excavations, coming projects, and we hope that we'll have you soon back on the podcast with some interesting findings, some interesting history. So thank you for joining and all the best. Thank you for watching. uh, until next time, goodbye. Jai Hind.